trying to figure out why this thing would not start. Now I've kind of got all the ignition back in, confirmed that the distributor is working and given me a monster spark. I know this is disconnected. That's because I've been triggering and firing over, turning over the ignition. I've not actually tried to start it today. I'm just trying to check over reasons why it might not have started. This little extension wire here is one of the causes. So I flattened the spades in there in order to get it a better contact between, because that would have originally just fitted straight onto the amplifier down here. Because it's come with a 3-pin amplifier, we then got this stupid little harness extension. Now, when I bench tested this thing, I was getting a good 2-inch spark off it with this cap, which is mine. And with this rotor, which is mine, because the cap and the rotor that came with the car looked a little bit like this one here. And this one here, you can see the pin is stuck in the middle, right? It's also a cheap, nasty one. Very cheap and nasty, as is this fucking thing. If you ever see one like this, honestly, hurl it as far as you can. And it even says on it that it's quality assured. You've got to be fucking joking me. Green box Lucas, shite. That is rubbish. So anyway, when it wouldn't start, that was one of the first things I changed, was the cheap nasty cap and the very cheap and nasty rotor arm. So I put my rotor, my cap, took the distributor out because partly because it wasn't actually in the right position. And all the leads have been rotated around. So I thought, well, while we're doing that, let's get it in the right position. And I think that may have happened when the owner had a problem getting this thing up to oil pressure. Took the distributor out to drive the oil pump directly and then was able to get oil pressure. Fantastic. Put the distributor back in, one tooth out, swap the leads around just to get the car running. But it was a bastard to start. So that was the reason for taking the distributor out. The air gap I found to be too tight. Now the air gap, I've done a video on that. It's in there somewhere. And also the vacuum advance was doing nothing. So I bought a brand spanking new one of these off Distributor Doctor. Now, when you get a vacuum advance, there is a number around the top of the Chinese man's hat, whatever you want to call it, around the top of that. And that's the number that you need to give to Martin at Distributor Doctor to make sure you get the right unit. Okay, so then I thought, well, we'll pop that back in again. I'll do a compression check. Pulled all the plugs out, and they're NGKR BPR6ES, which it should work. They're all okay. Now, if you remember from my description about this thing, it would crank over, flood itself really quickly, and then just wouldn't start. If I sprayed a load of Start You Bastard into the inlet, it would cough but not start. So we will get this thing started. The problem I've got now, pardon me, the problem I've got now is that when I turn the ignition on, yeah, it's immobilised. So it's doing nothing. We're getting nothing out of this at all because the immobiliser's kicked in. The immobiliser is that little box there. There is a way around them. I'm not going to tell you. I'm not doing that today because I wanted to get on with this. So what I've basically done is I've put myself a wire straight on the back of the starter motor. It comes up here and then I attach this onto the positive terminal. And we're getting oil pressure. I've also been able to go over the thing and get compression readings. So these are in PSI. Cylinder 1 through 7, cylinder 2 through 8. 1 is 165, 155, 180, 180, 150, 170, 155, 155. It's a tricky one really, isn't it? Because really you want them all around the 170, 180 mark, because you've got 170s and 180s in there. But they're not low enough to suggest there might be a head gasket problem. If one of these was down to like 120 or less, I might be a bit more concerned. As it is, it's probably just because the engine hasn't run for that long has probably suffered some ball wash. Really need to get it started up, give it a good run, and then check again. Right, so compressions on the whole are okay. Plug gaps were all set to 35 thou of an inch. Now, what I'm going to check next is I'm going to check the injectors are working. So I can disconnect this for all I've done with the oil pressure light. If you haven't seen me do this before now, it's Land Rover indicator. Yeah, one wire connects onto the oil pressure sender down on the oil pump. The other wire goes to the positive terminal on the battery. Okay, negative terminal connects up. So basically the circuit is that it's earthing back through to the battery negative. Okay, so that's all that is, just as an oil like. It just helps me work on these things in the engine bay. Right, I don't need that at the moment, but I am going to check the injectors are working. I need to get the immobiliser working before I can plug rover gauge in and see what's going on with things like the stepper valve and so forth. But each of the injectors has got a funny bit of paper on it for some reason, and I don't know what that is. So I'm suspecting this thing's been apart. What's it say on there? It doesn't say nothing. It might have said something at some point. Now, I'm not going to be able to check all the injectors. In fact, I might even just take the Plenum off just to double check what's going on in there, because it's only 6 hex bolts, and I can just lift it up and out of the way. Because obviously the injectors on this side are somewhat shrouded by the inlets, but I can certainly test this side. And all I do here, well, I'm going to mount you up on a tripod actually, because I've got one of these little fuckers. Probably unnecessary swearing there, Richard, but these are actually quite good at testing injectors. You can also use them to test the spray pattern if you put some fuel pressure behind, but I don't need to do that. All I'm going to do is just check that they are clicking like they should. Right, so the box of tricks comes with 2 cables. One of the cables is positive negative on the battery, and as soon as I connect up the negative terminal, it fires into life. There we go. And it's got a number of different modes here. There's 4 modes on this. It's got a short, just a quick test. It's got a medium test, a long test, a continuous, and then it does it in high voltage and a lower voltage. Really, you want to avoid putting 12 volts across these things because it just doesn't like it. Now, if I were to, let's take these out of the way. Remember to put these vacuum pipes and things back on. It's not really a problem. This can come off here. One injector. It has got something written on it. So I suspect someone's been in here and has had the injectors apart or had the inlet off or done something. I'll have to ask the owner. 2 sets of wires. You can test 2 injectors at the same time, but for the purposes of this test, I just want to check that each injector is actually doing something. So it's pointless me wiring up 2 injectors, otherwise one might be doing something and I'll get a noise and the other won't be doing anything and I won't get a noise. Right, doesn't matter which way round the wires go onto the injectors. I'll give you a look at these in a second. When I stop myself being quite so ham-fisted. I could have chosen one that perhaps you could have seen, but then where's the fun in that? Right, that's on. Go have a look, why don't you? So taking the connector off the injector, it's just push spring lift off. Connect the 2 wires onto the injector. Clank, clank, clankety clank. And then we're going to press the pulse. Didn't get nothing off that, did we? Oh, hang on a second, we need a program first of all. So let's select a program. 1, 2. Let's go for 3. Absolutely nothing. Go up to 6, which is the higher. There we are. It's going. Right, so you heard a buzz then? So we go up to 7, 8. That's a continuous setting. Now if I go back to 1, it should just do a pulse. Nope. Let's go to 2. Right, now it's pulsing on the lower voltage. So I can hear it pulsing. I'm happy enough that it is pulsing. Unless we get a particular leak down, it's difficult for me to confirm anything else. Now, the other thing I do like to do with the injector wire is check that the wires are actually connected to something, and that's not going to be easy to do because the shroud on this one is completely attached. But it's not unusual. If I take this one off, you might be able to see. It's not unusual for the wires to become disconnected from the inside here, and those two wires need to go back to the ECU. So I might need to just do some continuity testing to make sure that the things are actually receiving a signal. It's entirely possible, you see, that one of the wires is not working, and so therefore that injector will not be doing anything. This one here looks like it's been attacked by a rat, so we'll take that back because that's all knackered anyway. And then underneath there's a rubber boot, and underneath that you can see two wires. There's a yellow wire and I can see it's like purple and green, but I can check the continuity for each one. That rubber there, I don't know what happens to that, probably just the heat rather than being eaten by a rat. Right, go on to the next one. We tested one injector, test the next one. I mean, if we're getting the majority of them are actually doing something, I should be able to get this thing started. Immobiliser dependent, of course. Right, that one's noisier. That one sounds a lot better, and it's working at the correct pulse as well. So compare that zzz, sleepy bear noise with this one again. The access on this front one isn't that great, I'll be honest. It's working, it just doesn't sound the same. That could be, I've got a problem up here, I don't know. I really don't know, but the fact that it floods and doesn't run nicely could be down to a number of things, not least ignition issues and ECU issues. Right, that's working nicely. And then this one over here, which is the last one on this side. Does that go? Yeah, I can hear it buzzing. Okay, so they're all working. Now, disconnect that for a second, get me book. Right, looking at the book here, ECU, pins 13, pin 11. We've got white and yellow, and a yellow and blue. Goes into one side, or one pin of the injector. And then the other side, N and O, goes off to distribution point B, distribution point C, on page 1.5 and 1.5. We're on 1.6, so we've got 1.5. There we are, there's 1.5. Oh no, A1.5, that's right. So B goes back to N and O, and C goes back to N and O. There we go. Which goes back to this distribution point here, which goes back to the load injector relay. So in theory, if I was to check the continuity between the load injector relay and one terminal on each of these, I'll be able to get confirmation that there is continuity running through. Plenum is up and off, which is good. A terrible stink of fuel in here, which I'm not surprised about. I am a bit surprised about the lack of any sealant on this face to here, and also the fact it's just covered in shit. So I suspect that we're going to find that whoever had this thing apart and did all these tags all over the place didn't bother using something like a blue Hylamar or anything like that in order to seat the or seal the plenum against the trumpet base. Now I'm going to have to get the trumpet base off as well to find out whether that was seated as well. But that's only 6 bolts, not particularly difficult. It all seems okay in here. Just some waxy, crappy deposits in there, but overall it's actually pretty clean in there. I will have a look in at the throttle body, which is in this section here, and this little bit here, uncommonly these two pipes are actually in really good order, because normally they're rusted out, and one goes to the inlet and that one looks fairly original to me. I have found another original pipe on this, which is the pipe that goes from the bottom of the cooler tank to the top of the radiator. I lobbed it in here. You can tell it's original because it actually says on it 89, week 31, 89. Actually got a date stamp on it. Yeah, probably due for a change. I suspect we're going to find this one is an original pipe as well. Not a problem unless it's leaking, of course. Right, so I can carry on now and check these injectors, make sure that the continuity is there for everything, and then the trumpet base is going to come off. When you are working like this, by the way, strongly recommend you get something and put it over the top, because you drop something into one of those trumpets and you're unlucky, it's going to go all the way down to a cylinder or down to an inlet valve. If you're unlucky, sorry, if you're unlucky, that is. If you're lucky, you'll just be able to put a magnet in there and fish the fucker out. But you will curse. So I'm going to wedge a load of paper into each of those trumpets, and yeah, crack 'em with my testing. Now, if I'm going to test the continuity on each of the connectors here, it's actually dead easy. I just thought this through. So in theory, I could find a brown wire, put one end of the probe, my continuity tester, my multimeter, put it into one, and then just test all of the other 7 connectors, and then I can test all 4 of the yellow and white and the yellow and blue connectors in exactly the same way. So all I've really done here, taken out the probe, put a spade terminal in there, put it into one of the connectors and isolate it, get the other probe, and really just testing. Right, so I know that's getting continuity on one terminal but not the other, so there's no leak or there's no short. And that one's working, and so forth. Well, if I swap this one over to the other terminal on here, then in theory I should have exactly the same on this, and that's just stopped working. Oh, I'll tell you why that stopped working. It's because wires come out. Couldn't make this shit up, could you? You really couldn't make this shit up. God, Richard, you ham-fisted gibbon. Let's put it on this one here. Let's go for this one. That will do. Right, it's closer to the multimeter. Right, and then that works, and that works. That works. Now, to know whether I've got the brown wire or the white/blue wire, I now go to the other side. If I'm getting continuity through here, which I'm not, then I know I'm on the white or the blue wire. So now if I take that out of there, I go to the other terminal on here, then I can go onto this side. Right, so we know that that's the brown wire. So if I put this wire into here, I should now get continuity down this side. 1, 2, 3. Right, then what I need to do, realistically, is to check that the continuity to the ECU is good for the brown and also for the yellow and white. Now that's fairly straightforward, because when I look, because we know basically the loom in the engine bay is good. When I look here, remember we've got that B and C settings, and they go into a terminal post here, or a joint in the loom. The obvious one there is it's a nice big fat brown and orange wire that goes into pin 87 on the relay. And it'll also go down to pin 36. Actually no, that's that's the condenser fan, so there's no point checking that one. That's not used. buzz off. I'll get a shit fly buzzing me. So if I were to check from the brown to, not the pink, check from pin 87 on the relay, which is down here. I'm getting attacked by a shit fly. Fuck off. Right, so we're still connected into that wire there, which is beautiful. And now I'm going to go around over here, and my Mac Tools mat is there protecting my car. And then what I really want to do is pull the relay, just check I've got continuity to here, and I have. You hear it? So we know the brown wire has continuity through to the relay. We don't know the relay's working yet, but we can sort that out now that we know the loom is good. And then the other one I need to check is the ECU connector. So let me just retrieve my probe. Behave yourself, Richard. Right, so first and foremost, I don't know which one is which. This one had some insulation back, that's the yellow one. So that's yellow, which they're both yellow. Yellow and white. I couldn't tell you. So anyway, I'm looking at pins 11 and 13, which isn't too much of a problem. So let me now extract that from there and go into the yellow terminal, which is that one there. That's the yellow terminal. And then I'm going to go and find pins 11 and 13 on the ECU. If you remember, one corner is A, and I think it goes from there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 13. So that one or that one. Now interestingly, I'll show you in a second. You can just have a quick listen and see whether you can hear this bleeping or not. Right, that's good. Now I'm going to go and connect it up to the other one. Interestingly, terminal 13 is looking a bit mangled in there. Certainly that terminal is. I'll have to work out what that one is. We know the loom is good for yellow. And now, probably could have done it before, couldn't I? But now I need to work out which one is going to be 13. So I put that back on brown. Put the altimeter back. Save Richard. There is logic, folks. There is logic. Right, so that's the brown wire. So I can put that in there now. That then should have continuity through to pin 13. If you're keeping up with this, you're doing better than I am. I'm just going to go and lob that into pin 13 and oops, yeah, that's working. Right, so as far as the injector circuit is concerned, I'm happy. I think the injectors are all working. I think the injector cables are all showing good continuity, and I think that I am going to put this lot back together again. And the fuel pressure regulator, which I might have mentioned before, that's this chappy right here. So it does make life easier if you get the Plenum cover off and you can access it. It's even easier with the trumpet base because there are two nuts and bolts, one there and one hidden down here. So if the trumpet base was off, you'll be able to see them, and it's literally those two bolts, goes into the end of the fuel rail, the return pipe, which is absolutely rock solid, so I'm going to have to replace that, aren't I? That is, that's not healthy. And then there's a vacuum pipe which comes off the back here as well, which is on. There's a stub for it anyway. I wonder where the pipe went. There's the pipe there. I wonder if that wasn't connected. Let's put that back on. I'll get the trumpet base off and I'll show you. It's a lot easier, isn't it? That was the first tight one. Okay. This one. This one. This one. This one. That one's tighter. That one's loose. These are supposed to be done up to £30. And probably thread locked as well. But 4 of them were loose. Which really kind of is not very helpful, is it? Never mind. Soon have this off. Yeah, there's something on there, isn't there? I couldn't tell you what it was. It's a very ineffective thread lock, I think. Again, nothing really seating it down, and also there's an incredible amount of oil and shit all over the top here. So I suspect that we weren't really getting any inlet on this thing really at all. It's probably all over the place. I think we've potentially found another issue here. Easy enough to fix, and I must admit there is actually some, whatever that green shite is there. It's stickier on here than it was. Well, it's actually not sticky. And you can see where that hasn't even been crushed there. So it's not fitted. So I'm going to have to check the straight edge, I think. Clean this all up, check a straight edge, put it back together. Now, one of the nice things here, being careful of the brown wire at the back of the alternator there, because it'll be live. Now you get a really good view of the pressure regulator. A beauty, huh? So you can see the fuel comes in here under pressure, goes round the rail, back into the regulator, which is controlled by that little vacuum stub on the back there, which goes up to that stub on the base of the plenum, and then returns to the tank via this pipe here. Make sense? I hope so. I do hope so. Going through a clean-up on this thing, and I'm finding some unusual bits, like it's like the trumpets have been kind of glued in. They shouldn't need to be. I mean, it's as low as it can get. But look, another fucking great number there. Look, it's like a brittle. Never seen anything like it. Yeah, it's weird. So I'm just taking all of this crap out of it. It doesn't need it. Gonna get this. God, it's like cleaning plaque off teeth, I tell you. Oh, that's just gross, Richard. Yes, I think. Anyway, the key thing here was really just to clean up and get it into a cleaner state, and then lob it back onto the engine, which is pretty much where I've got to now. So I'm just going to give that a quick spray off, and it can go back on again. The base had here a whacking great big lump of carbon or something. So all I'm going to suggest is, when it comes to a metal on metal smooth engineered fit, make sure the bloody surface is clean before you wedge it all together. I mean, it's just ludicrous, isn't it? Never mind, shit happens. And there it is, all back together. Nice skim of blue Hylamar in there. That'll do the job, won't it? And again, Hylamar, blue Hylamar between the trumpet base and the inlet and the plenum cover. Nothing particularly, exciting to report there. Just as long as it's all sealed up, I'm happy. Right, then I thought I'd look at some of these cooling hoses. They're a fairly standard, looks like about an 8mm, maybe a little bit smaller diameter. I can measure that in a second. But this one, like the other hoses on the car, are aged. So let's swap this. Now, the reason I wanted to video this little bit, these two little stubs down here on the underside of the throttle body end of the plenum cover, let's take that out of the way just so we can see a bit better. There we are. These two little things down here. It's quite common for these pipes to rot through. They're very small and they're very delicate. If it does rot through, well, you can take the plenum cover off, undo the bolts on the underside, replace this piece or replace the pipe or do whatever you need to do with it. Personally, I don't bother doing anything with it, and all I do, well, certainly what I've done on my car, is run the pipe from here straight to the stub on the top of the inlet, because what's designed to happen is that runs to one of these, and then there's a pipe runs from the other one to the top of the radiator, and it's like an air bleed, I guess. Air bleed for the inlet manifold, which is then running hot coolant through the underside of the throttle intake, I guess, to warm the air before it goes into the plenum. So if it works, they wouldn't have put it on there for no good reason whatsoever, but I think for the majority of use on these things, yeah, and if that's damaged, don't worry about it, just bypass it. In this particular case, it's good, so I won't bypass it, but I am going to replace the pipework. So I think first I'm going to clip that pesky, that's not the best breather hose either, is it really? Let's face it. Because that's going to cause chaos in here. Well, not chaos, it will just, like, it's not going to run as nice as it possibly could run. Right, the only other things I've done with this, I've reconnected the front prop shaft, and I know the axle and everything's rusty. Don't worry about that, folks, just don't look at it. When the car's running, I'm going to get it up to the steam wash, get them to steam wash underneath, and I shall give it a decent coating. And I've also put the drop arm onto the steering box. That's in place. So I've done that. Wanted really to get the bumper onto the front of the car. You remember I had problems with the rust on this thing. There's one easy way to tell whether these things have been powder coated, which is what they seem to do these days, or put like an epoxy 2-pack black paint on there, or whether it's just transport paint. Get some thinners on a rag and wipe it across, and you can see there it's completely taken a layer of paint off here, completely. So my understanding is that this bumper, which has got a whacking dent there, not me, is powder coated. Sorry, powder coated. Transport painted. It's been transport painted, so I'm just going to take all this transport paint off. There are a few dents along here. Take all the transport paint off it, prime it, paint it. The same goes for the inside as well, because the danger is that if I don't do anything with the inside here, this has still got the same transport paint shite on it, and so you'll find that this thing will rust on the inside face and you won't notice. So I'll take the two mountings off, they can be painted as well, and then the whole thing really wants blasting back. You can see the Brit part stickers come off the top there, but it's still on the side, look at that. So I'll give them a damn good clean up. Customers give me the go ahead to get that sorted out. Blue clouds, nice. Yes, so happy now with all of this lot. Replace the two coolant pipes, put the top coolant hose on there, prime the cooling system up, reconnect the ignition circuit, and then we're going to give this thing a start, but not right now. Oh, I've also put the damper and the turret on that side. Now that I've got everything bolted into place, makes sense to get that sorted out. Okay, I think.